Where did you get my son's photo?
The scream cut through the marble lobby like a gunshot. Garrett Whitmore, $3.2 billion, 68 years old, grabbed the tarnished locket from a janitor's neck. A black janitor.
You stole this! Roaches like you crawl in at night and take whatever you can carry!
Let go of me! My mother gave me this!
Your mother? Probably just like you. A stray dog digging through garbage.
Don't you dare talk about my mother.
Open it. Now.
Pearl's hands shook. She opened it. Garrett saw his dead son's face staring back at him. His legs buckled. He hit the marble floor. His son died 26 years ago. So why was his photograph hanging around the neck of a poor black girl? But before that night in the lobby, before the scream, before the billionaire fell, let's go back. Back to where Pearl Bennett's story really began. Bankhead, Atlanta, the part of the city no tourism brochure ever mentions. Pearl lived in a one-room apartment on the 3rd floor of a building where the elevator hadn't worked in 4 years. A mattress on the floor, a hot plate on the counter, nursing textbooks stacked against a wall with peeling paint. She was 26 years old. She worked the overnight janitor shift at Whitmore Tower, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week, $11.50 an hour. After rent, utilities, tuition installments, and groceries, she had about $38 left each month. $38 between her and nothing. But Pearl Bennett was not a woman who felt sorry for herself. Every morning after her shift, she sat on that mattress and studied. She was halfway through the licensed practical nursing program at Atlanta Technical College. She studied until her eyes burned. Then she slept 4 hours and did it all again. Her mother had been a nurse, and Pearl intended to finish what her mother never could. Her mother, Lorraine Bennett. Pearl kept everything she had left of Lorraine in a shoebox under the bed. A few photographs, a folded church program from the funeral in 2012, a pair of cheap pearl earrings Lorraine wore every Sunday, and the locket. Every morning, Pearl performed the same ritual. She opened the shoebox. She held the locket. She opened it and looked at the 2 photographs inside. On the left, Lorraine. Young, beautiful, smiling, maybe 22 years old. On the right, a white man. Sandy hair, kind eyes, a face Pearl had studied 1,000 times but never identified. Lorraine never told her who he was. Pearl had begged, she had cried, she had screamed, but Lorraine only ever said one thing about that photograph. It was 3 weeks before the cancer took her. Lorraine could barely breathe. She pulled Pearl close. Her fingers were skeletal. Her voice was a whisper. That locket is yours, baby. Don't ever let it go. Don't ever let anyone take it from you. One day it's going to bring you home. Pearl was 12 years old. She didn't understand what home meant. She'd never had one. She turned the photograph over. On the back, in her mother's handwriting, Teddy. June 1999, Piedmont Park. Teddy. Just Teddy, no last name. Pearl had searched that name 100 times online, found nothing. Teddy was too common, a ghost with no last name. Every morning before sleep, Pearl crossed the hall to check on Ruthie Mae Coleman. 74 years old, early-stage dementia. A big woman with a laugh that shook the walls. She and Lorraine had attended the same church, Mount Carmel Baptist. After Lorraine died, Ruthie Mae became the closest thing Pearl had to family. Pearl brought her medication every morning, set out her pills, made sure she ate. Most days, Ruthie Mae drifted in and out of fog. She repeated stories. She forgot names. But sometimes, on rare, unpredictable mornings, a window of clarity would open. And what came through that window always made Pearl's heart stop. This was one of those mornings. Pearl set down the pill bottles. Ruthie Mae grabbed her wrist. Her eyes were suddenly sharp. "You look just like your mama today. Same stubborn chin." Ruthie Mae. Lorraine had secrets, baby. Big ones. She was scared all the time, even before the cancer, always looking over her shoulder, like somebody was coming for her. Pearl sat down slowly. "Who was my father? Did Mama ever tell you?" Ruthie Mae's voice dropped to a whisper. "She told me once. Said he was from a different world. Said his people had money, big money. Said they took him from her, took everything." Pearl leaned closer. "What do you mean, they took him?"
But she kept you.
Ruthie Mae's eyes filled with tears. "That was the one thing they couldn't take." Then the window closed. Ruthie Mae blinked. The fog rolled back in. She looked at Pearl like she was a stranger. "You want some grits, baby?" Now let's cross the city, from Bankhead to Buckhead. 14 miles, a different planet. A 14,000-square-foot mansion behind iron gates. Garrett Whitmore sat alone in a study lined with mahogany and leather-bound books. Crystal glasses he never used, awards he never looked at. 68 years old, $3.2 billion, and not a single person on earth who called him family. His wife Colette, dead from pneumonia in 1998. His only son Theodore, dead in a car accident in October 2000. 24 years old. The obituary said, survived by his father, no other survivors. No wife listed, no child, no one. Garrett stared at a framed photograph on his desk. Theodore at 23. Sandy hair, kind eyes. Taken in Piedmont Park, June 1999. The same photograph that lived inside Pearl Bennett's locket. But Garrett didn't know that yet. He opened a desk drawer and pulled out a second photograph, one he'd never shown anyone. Theodore with a young black woman, arms around each other, laughing on a park bench. On the back, in Teddy's handwriting, "Me and Elle, the happiest day." Garrett had found this photo in Teddy's belongings after the funeral. He had asked his estate attorney, Dorothea Cranston, to investigate. Dorothea reported back 3 weeks later. Her name was Lorraine Bennett, a nursing student. They dated briefly, nothing serious. She's moved on. No need to disturb her. Garrett accepted it. He had no reason to doubt Dorothea. She had managed his affairs for over 20 years. But tonight, alone, sleepless, haunted, Garrett held the photograph and whispered to the empty room. "Who were you, Lorraine? What did my boy never get to tell me?" 14 miles away, Pearl Bennett pressed the locket to her lips and fell asleep. Neither of them knew it yet, but they were holding the same face, asking the same question, and a woman named Dorothea Cranston had spent 26 years making sure they would never find each other. 3 nights later, Pearl was back inside Whitmore Tower. Not as a visitor, not as a guest. She was still on the cleaning crew. Her termination paperwork hadn't been processed yet. A bureaucratic delay, a crack in the system. Pearl knew it wouldn't last. She had maybe 1 or 2 shifts left before Fletcher Haynes caught the error and locked her out for good. So tonight, she wasn't just mopping floors. She was looking. The executive conference room sat on the 40th floor, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Atlanta skyline. A mahogany table long enough to seat 20, and behind the head chair on a polished credenza sat a row of framed photographs. Pearl had cleaned this room dozens of times. She had dusted those frames without ever really seeing them. But tonight, she saw. She set down her mop. She walked to the credenza. The largest frame held a family portrait, formal, expensive, the kind taken in a professional studio. A woman with pearls, a silver-haired man, and between them, a young man in a navy blazer. Sandy hair, kind eyes, that same gentle half-smile. Pearl's breath stopped. She reached under her uniform and pulled out the locket. She opened it. She held it next to the portrait, the face on the left, the photograph her mother had carried for decades, the face on the right, the young man in the billionaire's family portrait. They were the same person. "That's him," Pearl whispered. Her hands trembled so badly the locket almost slipped from her fingers. "That's Teddy." A brass plate beneath the portrait read, Theodore R. Whitmore, 1976 to 2000. Beloved son. Whitmore. Teddy's last name was Whitmore. The door opened behind her. Pearl spun around. And there he was, Garrett Whitmore himself, standing in the doorway with his cane. 2 o'clock in the morning. He came here sometimes, she would learn later. On the nights when the mansion was too quiet and the memories were too loud. He saw Pearl first. Then he saw what she was holding. The locket, open, raised beside his dead son's portrait. The color drained from his face. "What is that?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Where did you get that?" Pearl stepped back. Instinct told her to hide the locket, to close her fist around it and run. But something in the old man's voice stopped her. Not anger, not authority, desperation. "It's mine," Pearl said. "My mother gave it to me." Garrett took a step forward. His cane tapped the marble floor. "Open it. Let me see what's inside." "Why?" "Because that young man in that portrait—" Garrett's voice cracked. "That's my son. My son who's been dead for 26 years. And if his photograph is inside your locket, I need to know why." Pearl looked at the old man. She looked at the portrait. She looked at the locket in her hand. She opened it. Garrett leaned in. On the left, a young black woman smiling. On the right, his Theodore. And then Garrett saw the woman's face. And recognition hit him like a freight train. He knew that face. It was the woman from the hidden photograph in his desk drawer, the one laughing on the park bench, the one Teddy had written about on the back, "Me and Elle, the happiest day." Lorraine. My God. Garrett gripped the doorframe. That's the woman. Your mother, she's... He didn't finish. His cane clattered to the floor. He collapsed into a conference chair and pressed both hands against his chest. Pearl thought he was having a heart attack. He wasn't. He was drowning. In 26 years of questions that suddenly had nowhere to hide. But the moment shattered before it could become anything. The door swung open again. Fletcher Haynes. Behind him, a woman Pearl had never seen before. Mid-60s, silver bob, charcoal suit, eyes like a hawk scanning for prey. Dorothea Cranston. Fletcher had called her the second he spotted Pearl on the security cameras near the executive floor. Dorothea arrived in under 15 minutes. At 2 in the morning. That alone should tell you everything about how tightly she controlled this building. Dorothea assessed the scene in 2 seconds. Garrett, shaken, in a chair. Pearl, locket in hand, standing near Theodore's portrait. She understood instantly what was happening, and she moved to kill it. "Mr. Whitmore, are you all right?" Her voice was silk and steel. "This woman is part of the cleaning staff. She has no clearance for this floor." She turned to Pearl. No warmth, no hesitation. "Badge, now! You're terminated." "I was just cleaning the conference room." "You were trespassing on a restricted floor. Badge, now!" Pearl looked at Garrett. He was still sitting in the chair, pale, staring at nothing. He didn't speak. He didn't intervene. 26 years of trusting Dorothea had turned obedience into reflex. Fletcher took Pearl's badge. He grabbed her arm. He walked her to the service elevator, down 40 floors, and pushed her out the back entrance into the alley. The steel door locked behind her. Pearl stood in the dark. No badge, no job. The locket still warm against her chest. Back in the conference room, Dorothea handed Garrett a glass of water. "Who was that girl?" Garrett asked. His voice was quiet, dangerous. "Nobody. A janitor, probably casing the floor for theft. She had a locket with Theodore's photograph in it." Dorothea didn't flinch, but something behind her eyes moved. A flicker, fast, almost invisible. Fear. That's impossible, Garrett. Someone probably sold an old photo at a flea market. These things happen. Don't let it upset you. Garrett looked at Dorothea. He looked at her the way you look at a door you've walked through 1,000 times and suddenly notice it doesn't lead where you thought. He said nothing. He picked up his cane. He left. But something had shifted. A crack had opened in 30 years of blind trust, and Dorothea could feel it, the way animals feel a storm before the sky changes. The next morning, Pearl sat in the Atlanta Public Library. She hadn't slept. Her hands still shook, but her mind was on fire. Theodore R. Whitmore. Now she had a last name. She searched newspaper archives. She found the obituary, October 2000. Theodore R. Whitmore, 24, died in a single-vehicle accident on I-85 South, survived by his father, Garrett R. Whitmore. No other survivors listed. No wife, no child, no mention of Lorraine. Pearl kept searching. She pulled Fulton County Public Records, marriage certificates, and there it was. Digitized, buried in a database, but real. March 15, 2000. Theodore R. Whitmore married Lorraine A. Bennett, Fulton County Courthouse. Witness, a clerk named Gladys Underhill. Pearl stared at the screen. The library hummed around her. People walked past. The world kept turning, but Pearl's world had just stopped. Her mother was married to Theodore Whitmore. Legally. Officially. 7 months before he died. And Pearl was born on September 22, 2000, 5 months after the wedding. She wasn't just the daughter of a woman who knew a rich man. She wasn't an accident. She wasn't a secret. She was Pearl Whitmore. Born in wedlock, legal heir. And someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to make sure she never found out. The question was no longer who was her father. The question was, who erased him from her life? And were they still watching? Pearl walked into the Atlanta Legal Aid Society on Pryor Street carrying a manila folder. Inside that folder was everything she had. A printout of the marriage certificate, her birth certificate, father's name blank, her mother's death certificate, and 3 photographs from the shoebox under her bed. It wasn't much, but it was enough to change her life. Or destroy it. The receptionist told her to sit. She waited 40 minutes on a plastic chair in a hallway that smelled like coffee and old carpet. Then a door opened. Pearl Bennett? The woman standing in the doorway was mid-30s, natural hair pulled back in a tight bun, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, sharp eyes that looked like they hadn't missed a detail in their entire life. Iris Caldwell, civil rights attorney, 7 years at Legal Aid, known in the building for 2 things. She never turned down a case because it was too hard, and she never lost one because she was too soft. Pearl sat across from Iris and laid out the documents one by one. She told the story from the beginning, the locket, the photographs, Ruthie Mae's fragments, the encounter with Garrett Whitmore, the firing, the marriage certificate she found in the county database. Iris listened without interrupting. She picked up each document. She studied it. She set it down carefully. When Pearl finished, the office was silent for a long time. Then Iris spoke. If your mother was legally married to Theodore Whitmore at the time of his death, and you were born within that marriage, you have a claim, a significant one. Under Georgia intestacy law, you would be a direct heir. Pearl's chest tightened. What does that mean? It means the Whitmore estate owes you what your father would have inherited, and since Theodore was Garrett Whitmore's only child, Iris paused. We're talking about a $3.2 billion fortune. The number hung in the air like smoke. But I need to verify this marriage certificate, Iris continued. The digital record exists. That's good, but I need the original paper document from the county clerk's office. Digital records can be challenged. Paper is harder to dispute. Pearl nodded. What else? Iris leaned forward. I need to understand why your mother never pursued this claim herself. A legal marriage to a billionaire's son, that's not something you just walk away from, not unless someone made you walk away. Pearl thought about Ruthie Mae's words. They took him from her, took everything. Someone forced her, Pearl said quietly. I don't know who, I don't know how, but my mother spent her whole life scared, and she died with nothing. Iris took off her glasses. She looked at Pearl directly. I'll take your case. Pro bono. But I need you to understand something, Pearl. If we go down this road, the people on the other side will not roll over. This isn't small claims court. This is a $3.2 billion estate with lawyers, lobbyists, and 30 years of power behind it. They will come for you. They will try to discredit you. They will call you a liar, a fraud, a con artist. Are you ready for that? Pearl touched the locket at her neck. I've been called worse. 14 miles north, in the Buckhead mansion, Dorothea Cranston sat in her private office and made a phone call. She had not slept since the conference room incident. The image of that locket, open, glowing under fluorescent light, Theodore's face staring back from inside, played on a loop in her mind. For 26 years, Dorothea had maintained the wall, every brick, every crack, every loose stone patched before anyone noticed. She had buried a marriage certificate, altered a birth certificate, paid off a grieving mother, silenced a private investigator, controlled every piece of information that reached Garrett Whitmore's desk. And it had worked. For 26 years it had worked perfectly, until a girl with a gold locket knelt on a marble floor. Dorothea's hands were steady as she dialed, but her jaw was tight. The phone rang 3 times. Nolan, it's Dorothea. Silence on the other end. Then a voice, rough, tired, the voice of a man who hadn't been sober before noon in years. I was wondering when you'd call. The Bennett girl is digging. She's been to the Legal Aid Society on Pryor Street. She has a lawyer. Another silence. Longer this time. Then it's over, Dorothea. Let it go. It is not over. It is never over until I say it's over. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. You were an accessory to every document I altered, every record I removed. If this comes out, you don't just lose your license. You go to prison. We both do. She could hear Nolan Prescott breathing on the other end, heavy, uneven. The breathing of a man carrying a weight he was never strong enough to hold. What do you want me to do? He asked. Find out what she knows. Find out what her lawyer knows, and find any remaining physical evidence of that marriage, and destroy it. She hung up. But Dorothea wasn't just playing defense, she was playing chess. That same week, she filed an emergency motion with the Fulton County Clerk's office. Using her credentials as the Whitmore Estate's legal counsel, she requested that the digitized marriage certificate of Theodore Whitmore and Lorraine Bennett be flagged as potentially fraudulent under administrative review. The clerk complied. Why wouldn't he? Dorothea Cranston had been filing documents with that office for 3 decades. Her name carried weight. Her signature opened doors. With 1 phone call and 1 form, she had turned Pearl's strongest piece of evidence into a question mark. Then she went to Garrett. She found him in his study. He was staring at the photograph of Theodore and Lorraine on the park bench. He didn't hide it when Dorothea walked in. That was new. Garrett? She sat across from him. Her voice was warm, concerned, the voice of a woman who had perfected the performance of loyalty. I've learned something troubling. That cleaning woman from the other night. She's hired a lawyer. She's claiming to be Theodore's daughter. Garrett didn't look up. Is she? Of course not. It's a scam. I've seen this before. People preying on wealthy families with fabricated documents, a fake marriage certificate, a sob story about a dead mother. It's textbook extortion. You seem very certain. I am certain. I'm handling it. You don't need to worry about this. Garrett looked up. He studied Dorothea's face the way he used to study contracts, searching for the clause that didn't belong. The sentence that said one thing but meant another. "All right," he said. "Handle it." Dorothea nodded. She stood. She walked to the door. She didn't see Garrett open his desk drawer after she left. She didn't see him pull out a separate file, one he had commissioned from an independent attorney, one that contained Lorraine Bennett's nursing school records, her death certificate, and a hospital intake form from Grady Memorial listing her emergency contact as Theodore Whitmore, husband. Garrett Whitmore had been a passive man for 26 years, grieving, trusting, letting others manage the details of his life. But grief has a shelf life, and trust, once cracked, shatters fast. He picked up his phone and called his independent attorney. "I need everything you can find on a woman named Dorothea Cranston. Financials, property, shell companies, everything." He paused. "And I need it before she finds out I'm looking." 2 storms were building now, one from Bankhead, one from Buckhead. Pearl pushing up, Garrett pushing down, and Dorothea Cranston standing in the middle, holding a ceiling that was about to collapse on her head. The only question was, which storm would reach her first? Pearl came home on a Tuesday night and knew immediately something was wrong. The door was locked, nothing broken, but the air inside felt different, like the apartment had been breathing while she was gone. Everything looked the same. The mattress, the hot plate, the textbooks, but the shoebox. The shoebox was on the kitchen counter. Pearl always kept it under the bed. Always. Pushed against the wall, hidden beneath a folded blanket. Now it sat in the open. Her mother's photographs fanned out like a deck of cards. Someone had been here. Someone had touched her mother's things. On top of the photographs, a single typed note. No signature. "Drop this. Walk away. There is nothing for you in the Whitmore name. If you continue, you will lose more than a janitor's job." Pearl read it twice. Her hands shook, not from fear, from rage. She called Iris Caldwell. "They were in my apartment." "Photograph everything. The note, the shoebox, the door, pack a bag. You're staying at my place tonight." Pearl did exactly that. At the door, she paused. She looked back at the empty apartment, the mattress, the peeling paint, the hot plate. Whoever did this wanted her to feel small, to remember her place. Pearl closed the door. She was done being small. Iris had a problem. The marriage certificate, Pearl's strongest evidence, had been flagged as potentially fraudulent. Dorothea's emergency motion had placed it under administrative review. Iris needed the original paper document. She requested it from the county clerk's archive. The response came back in 2 days. No physical record found. Original document removed from archive. Date of last access, November 3rd, 2000. Signed out by D. Cranston, Whitmore Estate Council. Never returned. Iris needed a witness. The marriage certificate listed one, Gladys Underhill, courthouse clerk. Iris tracked her down. Gladys died in March 2018. Dead end. So Iris pivoted. She pulled Lorraine Bennett's medical records from Grady Memorial. The birth record listed an orderly on duty the night Pearl was born. Waylon Briggs, East Point, Georgia. A yellow bungalow at the end of a cul-de-sac. Waylon Briggs opened the door in a plaid bathrobe, 61 years old, retired after 32 years at Grady Memorial. Iris explained why they'd come. Waylon looked at Pearl, then at the locket around her neck. "Come inside," he said. They sat at his kitchen table. Waylon folded his hands. He spoke slowly, like a man who had rehearsed something for decades, waiting for the right audience. "I remember that night. September 22nd, 2000. Your mama came in alone. Active labor. I asked if anyone was coming. She said he was gone. That's all. He's gone." He looked at Pearl. "Healthy baby girl, 7 pounds 4 ounces. Your mama held you and cried, happy crying, the kind where you can't tell the difference." Pearl's eyes burned. But around midnight, a man showed up. White. Expensive suit. Not family. The head nurse turned him away, but he didn't leave. He stood by the elevator and made a phone call. I was 10 feet away. Waylon's jaw tightened. He said, "The baby is here. It's a girl. Tell Cranston." The kitchen went silent. Next morning, I processed the birth certificate. Standard procedure. Mother, Lorraine Ann Bennett. Father, Theodore R. Whitmore. Pearl stopped breathing. But 3 days later, my supervisor called me in. Said there was an error. She handed me a revised version. The father's line was blank. Someone had erased Theodore Whitmore's name from your birth certificate. She told me to forget about it. Called it a clerical correction. He shook his head. You don't white out a name on a legal document. That's not a correction. That's a crime. Waylon walked to a cabinet in the hallway. Bottom drawer. He pulled out a yellowed envelope held together by a rubber band that had lost its stretch years ago. I made a photocopy. The morning before they altered it. I kept it for 26 years. Pearl's hands trembled. Why? Waylon took off his glasses, wiped his eyes. Because I watched your mother hold you that night. The way she looked at you, like you were the only good thing left in her world. I was just an orderly. Nobody was going to listen to me. But I kept that paper because I believed someday someone would come looking for the truth. Pearl opened the envelope. The photocopy was clear. 26 years old, but perfectly legible. Father, Theodore R. Whitmore. Pearl pressed the paper against her chest. She bent forward and cried, deep, shaking sobs from a place she didn't know existed. Not sadness, not relief, something older than both, something locked inside her since the day her mother whispered, "One day, it's going to bring you home." And Pearl had no idea what she meant. Now she knew. Across the city, Dorothea learned through Fletcher that Pearl and a lawyer had visited Grady Memorial. She called Nolan Prescott. Her voice was ice. They went to the hospital. They're pulling birth records. If Briggs still has what I think he has, it's over. Then maybe it should be over, Dorothea. Find Briggs. Find out what he gave them, and find it before it reaches a courtroom. She hung up. Then she made a second call, to a contact at the district attorney's office, an old favor, a quiet arrangement. Dorothea had spent 26 years building a cage around the truth. But the truth had just found a key, and the hand holding that key belonged to the granddaughter of the man Dorothea had been robbing blind for 3 decades. Iris Caldwell didn't sleep for 6 days. She worked from her kitchen table, legal pads stacked 3 deep, coffee cups forming rings on documents she'd already memorized. She knew what was coming. Dorothea Cranston had money, connections, and 30 years of institutional power behind her. Iris had a photocopied birth certificate, a retired orderly, and a 26-year-old janitor with no savings. It wasn't enough to be right. She had to be bulletproof. So Iris built the case the way you build a wall in a hurricane, brick by brick with no gaps. Layer 1, the marriage. Iris drove to the Fulton County Clerk's office herself. She didn't call ahead. She didn't file a request online. She walked through the front door at 8:30 a.m. with a court order signed by a magistrate judge compelling the release of all internal access logs for marriage certificate archives. The clerk behind the counter was young, nervous. He'd never had an attorney show up with a court order before. Iris waited while he pulled the logs. 45 minutes. Then he came back with a printout. The log showed the complete chain of custody for every document in the marriage certificate archive, who filed it, who accessed it, who checked it out. Marriage certificate number FC-2000-03418. Filed March 15, 2000. Parties, Theodore R. Whitmore and Lorraine A. Bennett. Last accessed November 3, 2000. Checked out by D. Cranston, Whitmore Estate Council. Return date, blank. The original paper certificate had been removed from the archive 26 years ago, 5 days after Theodore's death. It was never returned, and the signature on the checkout log matched Dorothea Cranston's notarized signature on file with the county. Iris made 3 certified copies of the log. She left the clerk's office and sat in her car for 5 minutes. Her hands were steady. Her mind was not. This wasn't just a cover-up. This was systematic erasure. A woman had walked into a government building and stolen a legal document, and no one had noticed for 26 years. Layer 2. The birth. Waylon Briggs came to Iris's office and gave a sworn affidavit. 3 pages. Notarized. Every detail. The night of Pearl's birth, the man in the expensive suit, the phone call, the words, "Tell Cranston," the alteration of the birth certificate, his supervisor's instruction to forget about it. Iris also submitted Waylon's photocopy of the original birth certificate to a forensic document examiner, Dr. Harold Fleming, retired FBI, now consulting from his office in Decatur. Fleming analyzed the paper stock, the typeface, the ink patterns, and the formatting. His report came back in 4 days. The document is consistent with Georgia Department of Public Health birth certificate forms used between 1998 and 2002. The typeface matches Grady Memorial Hospital's Records Department printer model confirmed through archived equipment logs. No evidence of digital manipulation or forgery. In my professional opinion, this is an authentic photocopy of an original government-issued document. Iris read the report twice. Then she locked it in her fireproof safe. 2 bricks in the wall. Solid. Verified. Unshakable. Layer 3. DNA. Iris filed a motion with the Fulton County Superior Court requesting a court-ordered DNA comparison between Pearl Bennett and Garrett Whitmore. She cited the marriage certificate, the birth certificate photocopy, the affidavit, and the forensic analysis. The motion was assigned to Judge Emmeline Harwood, 56 years old, 18 years on the bench. Known for 2 things, she followed the evidence wherever it led, and she had 0 patience for attorneys who wasted her time. Dorothea Cranston's legal team, she had hired 2 attorneys from a downtown firm the moment she learned about the motion, filed an objection. They argued that Pearl's claim was based on unverified documents of questionable provenance, and that a DNA test would constitute an invasive violation of Mr. Whitmore's privacy. Judge Harwood read the objection. She read Iris's supporting evidence. She ruled in 1 sentence. Motion granted. DNA samples to be collected within 14 days. The test was conducted at an independent lab in Midtown. Cheek swabs, chain of custody documented with photographs at every step. Results sealed and delivered directly to the court. Iris didn't tell Pearl what she expected. She didn't want to build hope on something she couldn't control. But privately, in the notes she kept in a leather journal she never showed anyone, she wrote, "The locket doesn't lie, the timeline doesn't lie, the paper doesn't lie, and blood never lies." Layer 4. The money. This was the layer Iris almost missed. She was focused on identity, proving who Pearl was. But then she asked herself a different question, not who, but why. Why did Dorothea Cranston care? She was an estate attorney, a chief of staff. Why would she risk everything, her career, her freedom, her reputation, to hide a baby? The answer was always the same: money. Iris filed a subpoena for the Whitmore estate's financial records from the year 2000. Specifically, she requested all cash disbursements, wire transfers, and check withdrawals between October 1st and December 31st. The records arrived 10 days later. Iris spent an entire weekend going through them, line by line, and on page 44, she found it. October 28, 2000, 3 days after Theodore's funeral. A cash withdrawal of $50,000 from the Whitmore estate's operational account. No payee listed, no invoice attached, just a handwritten note in the ledger. DC, Special disbursement approved. D.C. Dorothea Cranston, $50,000, the exact amount Nolan Prescott had described. $25,000 for Lorraine, $25,000 for his services. But Iris kept digging. She pulled records from 2001, from 2002, from every year through 2025, and the pattern emerged like a bruise darkening under skin. Every year, every single year for 26 years, Dorothea had made similar withdrawals, small enough to avoid triggering automatic audits, large enough to add up. $150,000 here, $200,000 there, routed through shell companies with names like Cranston Holdings LLC and Piedmont Advisory Group. Iris tallied the total. She checked it twice. Then she sat back in her chair and stared at the number. $4.6 million. Dorothea Cranston hadn't just hidden Pearl to protect a family secret. She had hidden Pearl to protect a crime. A 26-year embezzlement scheme that would have collapsed the moment a new heir triggered a forensic audit of the estate. Pearl wasn't just inconvenient. Pearl was the one person on Earth who could expose everything. And then Nolan Prescott broke. Iris found him in East Atlanta, a rented room above a bar on Flat Shoals Road. The hallway smelled like cigarettes and regret. She knocked. The door opened 3 inches. One bloodshot eye stared through the gap. "My name is Iris Caldwell. I'm an attorney representing Pearl Bennett. I know what you did to Lorraine Bennett in September 2000. I have documents. I have a witness. You can talk to me now, voluntarily, or you can talk to a judge under subpoena. Your choice, Mr. Prescott." The door stayed at 3 inches for a long time. Then it opened all the way. "I've been waiting 26 years for someone to come," he said. "Sit down." He talked for 2 hours. His voice cracked. His hands shook. He drank 3 glasses of water and never touched the bottle of whiskey on the shelf behind him. He told Iris everything. Dorothea's instructions, the visit to Grady Memorial, the lies he told Lorraine, that the Whitmore family would take her baby, that a black woman with no money would be destroyed in court, that $25,000 was the best she'd ever get. The NDA he pushed across her hospital bed while she held a 3-day-old infant. "She was crying," Prescott said. His voice was barely audible. "She was holding that baby and crying, and I stood there in my suit and told her she had no choice." He stopped. He pressed his palms against his eyes. "She didn't want money. She wanted her husband's family to know about her child. She wanted her daughter to have a grandfather. And I took that from her because a woman in a designer suit told me it was business." He signed a sworn declaration, 8 pages, every detail, names, dates, dollar amounts, instructions from Dorothea, his own role, his silence. When he finished signing, he looked at Pearl, who had been sitting in the corner of the room, silent, gripping the locket the entire time. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know that word is too small, but it's all have." Pearl looked at him. She didn't speak. She didn't nod. She just held the locket, the way her mother taught her to hold it, tight, close, like it was the only anchor in a sea that kept trying to pull her under. That night, Garrett Whitmore sat in his study with the file his independent attorney had compiled. He read it page by page. The marriage certificate. The hospital intake form listing Lorraine's emergency contact. Theodore Whitmore, husband. Lorraine's death certificate. Pearl's school records. He reached the last page. He set the file down. He picked up the framed photograph of Theodore from his desk. He held it against his chest. "You had a wife," he whispered. "You had a daughter, and nobody told me." He stared at the photograph of Teddy and Lorraine on the park bench. 2 young people laughing in the sun. A moment stolen from a life that someone decided they didn't deserve. Then the grief turned to something else, something harder, something with teeth. He picked up the phone. "Dorothea, come to the house, now!" Across the city, Dorothea Cranston set down her wine glass. She checked her reflection in the mirror. She straightened her blazer. She had no idea she was walking into the last room that would ever call her welcome. Dorothea Cranston pulled through the iron gates of the Buckhead mansion at 9:14 p.m. She walked through the front door without knocking. She never knocked. This was her territory, her kingdom, the house she had managed, controlled, and bled dry for 3 decades. The foyer was dark. Only one light, coming from the dining room. She followed it. Garrett sat at the head of the dining table, documents spread across the mahogany surface like evidence on a detective's board. The marriage certificate, the birth certificate photocopy, the financial records, Nolan Prescott's sworn declaration. Behind him, his independent attorney. Flanking the doorway, 2 security officers Dorothea had never seen before. Her step faltered, just barely. Then she recovered. She always recovered. "Garrett, what's all this?" "Sit down, Dorothea." She sat. She crossed her legs. She folded her hands, mirroring his posture, the way she'd learned in 30 years of managing him. Garrett slid the documents across the table. One by one, the marriage certificate, the county clerk's access log with her signature, Waylon Briggs's affidavit, the financial records. $4.6 million routed through Cranston Holdings LLC and Piedmont Advisory Group. With each document, Dorothea's mask cracked a little more. "I discovered the marriage after Theodore's death," she said carefully. "The woman was nobody. I handled it to protect the families." "You sent a man to a hospital bed," Garrett said, 3 days after my granddaughter was born. You told a 22-year-old mother she'd lose her baby. You made her sign away her rights while she was holding my son's child." His voice cracked, but he kept going. "Lorraine Bennett died of cancer in 2012. She died broke. She died in a public hospital, and my granddaughter, 12 years old, buried her mother alone. Because you decided a black woman and her baby were bad for business." Dorothea's eyes glistened. Not remorse, realization. Every exit was sealed. "Everything I did for this family," she whispered. "You did it for $4.6 million. Garrett slid a final page across the table. "Your termination, effective immediately. My attorney is referring this to the Fulton County District Attorney." "You can't do this. I built this empire alongside you." "You built it on a stolen baby's birth certificate. Get out of my house." Security stepped forward. Dorothea stood. She looked around the room one last time. The chandelier, the paintings she had chosen, the kingdom she had controlled for 30 years. Then she walked out. The lock turned behind her. She would never enter that house again. 2 weeks later, Fulton County Superior Court, Courtroom 4B. Judge Emmeline Harwood reviewed the evidence in silence. Pearl sat in the front row beside Ruthie Mae. Iris stood at the plaintiff's table. Garrett sat 3 rows behind Pearl, close enough to see the locket around her neck. The evidence was overwhelming. The marriage certificate, the affidavit, the forensic authentication, Prescott's declaration, the financial records, the county clerk's log, and the DNA results, opened by Judge Harwood in open court. 99.98% probability. Pearl Bennett was the biological granddaughter of Garrett Whitmore. Dorothea's attorneys made one final argument, that the NDA Lorraine signed was a binding waiver. Judge Harwood dismissed it in a single sentence. An agreement obtained through fraud and intimidation, imposed on a woman 3 days after giving birth with no independent counsel, is void as a matter of law. It was void the day it was signed. She turned to Pearl. Pearl Bennett is the legal daughter of Theodore R. Whitmore and Lorraine A. Bennett Whitmore. Her birth certificate shall be amended. Her inheritance rights are fully restored. Ruthie Mae let out a single sound, half laugh, half sob, that broke the silence like sunrise through a window. Pearl didn't move. Her hand was on the locket. Her eyes were closed. She wasn't listening to the courtroom. She was listening to her mother's voice, a whisper from 14 years ago, carried on breath that barely had enough life left to form words. One day, it's going to bring you home. Pearl opened her eyes. For the first time in 26 years, she was home. Outside the courthouse, the sun hit Pearl's face like a baptism. She stood on the steps, the locket warm against her chest. Behind her, Iris Caldwell was shaking hands with reporters. Ruthie Mae was sitting on a bench, fanning herself, laughing and crying at the same time. And at the bottom of the steps, Garrett Whitmore. He stood alone, his cane in one hand, the framed photograph of Theodore in the other. He held it up so Pearl could see. "He would have loved you," Garrett said. His voice broke on every word. "He would have been so proud of who you became." Pearl opened the locket. She held it beside Garrett's photograph. Teddy, at 23, sandy hair, kind eyes, framed in tarnished gold on one side and polished silver on the other. Father and grandfather, separated by death. Reunited through a girl who never stopped holding on. Pearl walked down the steps. One step, then another. Then she was standing in front of a man whose blood ran through her veins. Garrett opened his arms. Pearl fell into them, and for the first time in 26 years, Garrett Whitmore held his family. 6 months later, Pearl enrolled at Emory University, the same nursing program her mother attended in 1998. She didn't move into the Buckhead mansion, not right away. She kept her Bankhead apartment for 3 months. She needed to know her identity didn't depend on an address. But she visited Garrett every evening. He told her about Teddy, his jazz piano, his fear of thunderstorms, his habit of feeding stray cats. She told him about Lorraine, her Sunday hymns, her lavender perfume, the way she braided Pearl's hair while humming songs she never named. They were building something. Not replacing what was lost, something new. On top of the ruins, brick by brick. Ruthie Mae moved into a guest cottage on the property. Good food, a garden, a full-time caregiver. On her clear mornings, she sang hymns that drifted through the windows like proof that some things survive everything. Dorothea Cranston was indicted by a Fulton County grand jury. Fraud, embezzlement, obstruction of justice, tampering with public records. $4.6 million stolen across 26 years. Nolan Prescott cooperated with prosecutors. He received 18 months probation. He wrote Pearl a letter. She read it once. Folded it. Placed it in the shoebox beside her mother's photographs. She didn't reply. Forgiveness was not something she owed. It was something she would find in her own time. Or not at all. Fletcher Haynes was fired. The cleaning company paid a wrongful termination settlement. Pearl donated every dollar to the Mount Carmel Baptist Church Community Kitchen, the same kitchen that fed her when Lorraine couldn't afford groceries. Pearl sat in the garden. Evening light fell through the magnolia trees. The locket hung around her neck, polished now, restored. Lorraine on the left, Teddy on the right. She closed it, held it against her heart. Lorraine Bennett never saw this garden, never sat in this house, never watched her daughter graduate. But she gave Pearl the only inheritance that mattered. Not money, not a name, a locket and a whisper. One day, it's going to bring you home. And it did.
So the woman scrubbing floors at Whitmore Tower was in Whitmore, and for 26 years, one woman made sure he would never find out. Dorothea stole documents. She erased a name from a birth certificate. She spent 26 years building a cage around the truth, and it worked until a girl knelt on a marble floor and opened a locket. But here's what stays with me. Lauren Bennett was dying. No money, no lawyer, no power. She couldn't fight back. So instead, she planted a seed. She put that locket around her daughter's neck and whispered, "One day, it's going to bring you home." She didn't live to see it, but she was right, because the truth doesn't need power, it just needs someone stubborn enough to keep holding on. And that makes me wonder how many people out there are carrying something they don't fully understand yet. A promise, a name, a story no one ever finished telling them. What if the answer you've been looking for has been with you this whole time?